In this session, we're going to focus on you, the helper, and take a look at a theory of stress and burnout, and also take a look at some of the things that stress you the most, and also look at what are some antidotes to these things that stress you very much. So I'm going to ask you to be a little bit selfish for a change, and to think about yourself and your own experiences as a helper. Here's a model of stress that you might find helpful in thinking about, well, what causes me stress as a helper? As we're encountering events in our worlds, we do basically two appraisals. The first appraisal is, am I okay? Am I threatened by this? Now, this threat could be to our self-esteem. It could be, as helpers, to our basic motivation and goal to help others. In other words, if I see a situation I don't know what to do and I don't have the skills and I'm very perplexed, that is stressful to me because I am motivated and have the goal of helping that person, and I'm not able to move toward that goal. So that's stressful, and that's threatening. It also can be threatening to my self-esteem because I don't feel good about myself if I'm not able to help. Or somebody might say something to me. Say a person I'm caring for says, geez, you weren't here when we needed you. Oh, you feel horrible. So there's that initial appraisal of, am I threatened? Of course, we could have real-world threats like a car is racing at us, etc. But you see, the problem is that there's a kind of biological naivete occurring in us in terms of our brains not having kept up with the rest of evolution, and that our brains don't know the difference between a saber-toothed tiger running at us and somebody saying, you didn't do a very good job in this helping situation. Both of them get us all aroused. We have the fight or flight response. Stress hormones are surging through our body. But in the modern world, we're not going to run and actually burn up these stress hormones. So there we are standing, experiencing the stress response, but not being able to burn them up. Now that's where some other kinds of responses come in that can help us manage stress, like going out and exercising. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me say this, that we are threatened, and when we are threatened, we then make a second appraisal, which is, can I cope with it? So if we're threatened and we say, you know, I can cope with this situation. I have the friends, I have the skills, I have the ability to really make a difference in this situation if I get additional support, if I learn new skills, etc. Then we don't have the stress response. So if we make the appraisal, I can cope. Now you can see in all this, we don't have stress. I am appraising my environment in two fundamental ways. Am I okay? Can I cope? So you see the importance of appraisals. Now, one of the discoveries we've made is that it's a lot better if you experience events in the environment as challenges rather than as threats, because threats are more likely to lead down the pathway toward stress. If we see things as challenges, we get mobilized, and there's a different physiological response to challenge. So that's the ideal situation. However, we can't always reinterpret things or interpret things as challenges as opposed to threats, but that's generally the more stress-hardy way to approach things. To see things as challenges, to see these situations as situations we can engage in and try to meet the needs of the individual or to rise to the occasion. Now, in this context of stress and coping, there are a couple of things that cause us problems that are stressful to us that you may not normally think about. One of these is that we often don't get enough support for ourselves doing the work. We live in a death-denying society. And if you're working with people who are grieving and you're trying to get support for doing this work, sometimes you're not going to get as much support as you really need. And this is a big problem. You don't have to read Ernest Becker's beautiful book, The Denial of Death, to know that despite the fact that 10 out of 10 Americans still do it, death and dying are of questionable taste in our society. If you describe what you're doing working with people who are grieving, bereaved, at a party, you're going to get one of two responses. You're going to get people looking at you and saying, how can you do that? And they kind of put you up on a pedestal and say, how wonderful, I couldn't do that. And then they walk away. Or they might look at you and say, maybe there's something wrong with you. So you're either a saint or a ghoul, but neither of those responses is very helpful, so we don't get all the support we need. Also, because of what I've talked about earlier is the distress disclosure dilemma, we don't share all our experiences. Maybe we're not in a support group. Maybe we're not taking care of ourselves that way, and we're not getting all the help we can. And we know from research that people don't always avail themselves of the support that's possible around them. It's like the story of the man who's in the town and the water's rising, there's a flood, and he is there on the first floor, and a rescue boat comes. He says, "No, I'm staying, I'm putting my faith in the Lord." And then he's up on the second floor, and another rescue boat comes, and he says, "No, I'm staying, I'm putting my faith in the Lord." And finally he's up on the rooftop, and a helicopter comes with a rope ladder, and they say, "Come on, sir, you've got to come." And he says, "No, I'm staying, I'm putting my faith in the Lord." And suddenly the water washes him into the waves, and he drowns, and he's at the pearly gates. And he's very miffed, and he looks up at St. Peter, and he says, "Look what happened to me. I put my faith in the Lord, and I drowned." And St. Peter looked at him very calmly and said, "I don't know what you're complaining about. We sent you 2 boats and a helicopter." So there are boats and helicopters all around us. And we need to avail ourselves of these boats and helicopters and to take advantage of the possible support that is there. And I think that it's best if we can find people who are doing the same kind of work who we can talk to. We can get support from our family, we can get support from friends, but it's ideal if we can get support from other people doing this kind of work. Another stressor that causes us a lot of problems is us. And by this I mean how we think about things. And again, this gets back to the appraisal aspect of stress. We have irrational thoughts that can give us a hard time. Have you ever had this thought, "I must be approved of by everyone," or "I must experience distress whenever I encounter human suffering," or "I must always know the best thing to do in every helping situation," "I should be able to solve all the problems people present to me," "I should be able to solve other people's problems in the first place"? If you combine this with statements like, "If only I were," "If only I were more sensitive, things would have worked out right," "If only I were more intelligent, more caring, more organized, more able, more competent," then things would have worked out better. These are unrealistic expectations combined with these kinds of irrational thoughts can really wreak havoc with us and cause us a lot of stress. The term burnout has become a bit of a cliche in our culture. First graders are coming home from school and saying to their parents, "Mom, I'm burned out on my teachers." But nevertheless, it refers to a very important experience that many helpers do experience. Now, one definition of burnout is the emotional, physical, and psychological exhaustion resulting from long-term involvement with people in stressful situations. Now, when we think about burnout, we can look at the entire literature and also from all my experiences with people who burned out. And by the way, I'm a member of the Formerly Burned Out Club, and I want to say that you can burn out for a day or a week or a month and come back and be a fulfilled and happy helper. It's not the end of your helping career if you once experienced some of the things that I'm talking about, and it's important to keep that in mind. In fact, I like to think about burnout as sort of a crisis, but it's a crisis in the sense that the Chinese think about it, and their pictographs for crisis include both danger and opportunity. So it's a kind of a wake-up call for us as helpers. We need to pay attention to ourselves and do something different to restore more balance in our lives and in our helping careers. One of the elements of burnout that's been identified is demoralization. It's the sense, I can't make a difference. I can't do this. I can't help this person. I can't help this person find their way through this grief experience. I can't do all the things that I want to do as a helper. And this is very difficult. So burnout is this kind of frustrated idealism and trampled sensitivities and frustrated goals. So I'm not able to make a difference. And when we start feeling like that, we're inching toward the burnout experience. Another component in burnout is diminished caring, and this is really tough. When you start feeling like, I don't want to see another person. How can I not want to see another person? This is why I got into this work. I wanted to be caring. And you know, today when that phone rang, I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to go visit anyone. And this is very tough for us to take. We start to detach a little bit, and we start to pull in those bonds of we-ness. farther and farther, till finally we're only really connected to our family, and then maybe finally only to ourselves, and maybe then we even start to lose touch with ourselves because we're way over here on this continuum of emotional involvement, the distant, uninvolved, burned out position. We have some crazy experiences when we're burning out. One friend of mine, who was director of a hospice, had an experience once in Safeway, and she was standing in line, and she had just come from the aisle where she was trying to decide whether or not to buy Pepperidge Farm croutons, and she was standing there saying, I don't know if I can get these for myself. I just left the hospice where there were 4 patients who couldn't even take water, and they were so miserable, and I feel guilty taking Pepperidge Farm croutons. And then she stopped and thought about it and said, what's wrong? Golly, I've got to just get out of here. This is crazy. So she went to the checkout line, and the woman in front of her was complaining about how long these lines are and how many times she's had to stand here, and she kept complaining and complaining, and finally my friend looked her right in the eye and was thinking about all of the people back in the hospice and said, ma'am, you should be happy you can stand in this line. And the woman had a real ego chill experience, we call it, and she went running down the aisles to the other checkout stand, and she was terrified. And this was, let's face it, socially inappropriate behavior. I can't tell you the number of times at parties when I've stood there saying, you won't be talking about this when you're on your deathbed. You won't be talking about your new car. Go home and talk to your children. Go home and be loving. And that's what you're going to be thinking about when you're on your deathbed. And this is all part of a process of kind of disconnecting, of not being a lot of fun at parties, I must say. So these are some of the experiences that we can have when we're burning out. So what we need to do is we need to be aware of when these things are happening. We need to see this as a kind of a wake-up call. And we need to say, hey, okay, a voice inside is saying to me, I need to take care of myself. I need to get more balance in my life. Let's turn our attention to how we can manage stress and prevent burnout. What do our helpers tell us helps them continue doing this caring work and to maintain balance in their lives? What do they hold on to? What are their tree limbs that keep them out of the helper's pit?
It isn't always easy, but I make a conscious effort to leave my work behind, and when I go home realize that now I'm home and now I'm in a different place of recreation, of ministry, whatever, to kids, to family. And I try to give good quality time to my children. With the little time I have, I try to make it good quality time and try to watch less TV and that type of thing and really spend more time with family. And I find that that time rejuvenates me.
Yep. One of the things I do is exercise. I have aerobic class twice a week, and unless it's just really something earth-shattering, I do not miss those aerobic classes, even though I may be so tired. They drag myself in, but when I get out, I really feel a lot better.
I feel the strength in my family, my wife and my sons. You know, I feel it, even though I don't see them daily. I mean, my sons, I see my wife every day, I hope, but my sons have been such a strength to me.
I feel I'm very blessed with the group that I work with, because we have a meeting every Tuesday and share everything that's going on, and then during the week we can almost tell if another staff member is down because of the patient they're working with, if the patient has died or is close to death, and that way we reach out to each other.
Humor is very important to me. As I said, that's one of the things I don't take myself too seriously most of the time, but when I find myself doing that, I really do just step back and laugh. And I try and find as many things to laugh about as possible. I try to put lightness and humor and fun in whatever. In my office, I have bubbles. They say, don't blow your stack, come on in and blow bubbles. I have a smiling face that is a harmonica. If it gets too quiet or too serious, I blow the harmonica. So I just find a great release in laughter.
What are some antidotes to stress? I'd like to share a few ideas that you might find helpful as you're dealing with the stressful experiences you encounter as a helper. And I'd like to frame these in terms of this model of stress I was presenting earlier. And if you think about that, basically you have events in the world impinging on us, making demands on us. Now, if the demands from our environment exceed the resources that we have at our disposal, then we have stress. If demands exceed resources, we have stress. Now, what we can do then to counter stress is increase our resources. And in terms of this model of stress, which I described as including a primary appraisal of am I okay, and then a secondary appraisal, can I cope? If you think about that, if we change the nature of the events in the world and reduce the demands on us, you're not going to feel threatened very often. So we might reduce the number of people we're taking care of. We might not see so many people, and that will reduce the demands. Or not work with somebody that we really can't, for some reason, be effective with. And make that decision and accept that, and that will reduce our stress. We can also change our appraisals. So if we have a difficult situation, we can see it as, this is challenging, I've got to figure this out, instead of saying to ourselves, oh my gosh, I can't deal with this, I'm overwhelmed. So we can intervene at the level of appraisals, and at that point in the stress cycle. And then we can also, once we have experienced stress, because sometimes we can't intervene effectively at those other points, then we have the stress hormones raging inside of us. We need to get rid of those, and then we need to do something like exercise or meditate, which I'm going to talk about in a few moments. So let's talk about some of the antidotes to stress that I found can be most helpful and that other helpers have told me work very well for them. The first is to set limits to your time and involvement with the people you're caring for. These interactions are difficult. We have to recognize that. No matter what your coping strategies, stress is unavoidable. We have to do something in terms of setting limits, because if we just let ourselves get overly involved with all of these difficult situations and get in over our head repeatedly, we're going to have a hard time. And sometimes it's really hard for very caring people to say, hey, I have to set limits. I can't see another person this week. And it's really better for them and for you if you set these limits. A second antidote is to exercise. Like I was saying, if we have the stress response already going on, the hormones are already going, there's nothing you can do about that. You can't reverse this process except by doing what I call changing the oil. I've had two very old cars for a long time, and they keep running, and I think the only reason is that I change the oil every 3,000 miles. We have to treat our bodies the same way. Now, some of you may be feeling like the saying, I tried exercise once and that was enough. Or someone said, I thought about exercising once and laid down until that thought went away. But it's important that you think about regular aerobic exercise if you're going to be doing this kind of work, because the research shows that regular aerobic exercise is very strongly negatively correlated with burnout. That if you exercise frequently, you're less likely to have burnout. I know for myself, I jog and play basketball. And at the end of a very tiring day, when I'm feeling very exhausted, I find that going out and exercising just kind of clears the decks. I feel fresh. I feel like I have a new evening with my family. I feel very good. And I think it's a very important strategy to keep in mind. Now, that's a hyper-metabolic strategy. There's also a hypo-metabolic strategy, which is taking the time and taking a deep breath and letting yourself relax. And you can do this systematically, doing the relaxation response that Herbert Benson has written about, or some form of meditation or prayer where you sit and are very contemplative and just sit and take care of yourself and be with yourself and practice either a formal meditation or relaxation procedure. This is a hypometabolic strategy. And that involves just relaxing, giving yourself a chance to decompress and take care of yourself. Another strategy is related, and that's compartmentalizing. You need to have a sanctuary. You need to have a place and a time when you're not dealing with helping, when these issues don't come into your life, where you can decompress. There's been debates about what's the optimal commute time. Is it 15 minutes or 25 minutes or 5 minutes? How much time do we need to leave all that work behind and go home and be away from it and have another aspect to our life? It's very important to have balance in your life, to have other things that you're involved in, so that if things don't go so well in the helping endeavors, when you come home, you're able to really have success in that realm and to enjoy that and have those other kinds of commitments. It's important also to be aware of your moment-to-moment feelings. You know, what's going on for me? How am I feeling as I go to see this person and as I'm leaving? And to promote this, I think it's very important that we're friendly to our experiences, just like we're trying to be friendly to the experiences of the people we're caring for. We have to be friendly to all these different feelings we're having as helpers. What's going on for us? What am I feeling? What am I thinking about this? So that we can pay attention when we're hurting inside or when we're having some other ideas about how we can be more helpful to the people we're caring for. So to acknowledge and examine these fears, emotional buttons, and different kinds of experiences we're having inside can be very helpful. Another antidote is to really work hard at developing and strengthening our interpersonal helping skills. I always say it's better to wear out than to rust out, and it's good to have, as we've talked about earlier, a wide repertoire of helping skills. Now, Hans Selye has, after 50 years of research on stress, discussed 3 different principles for stress management. The first of these was, know if you're a turtle or a racehorse and act accordingly. So you have to look inside and say, hey, am I the kind of revved up person who needs to keep going constantly over and over again? And if you are, then you need to do that. You need to be busy or you're going to be more stressed. He also said that we should practice altruistic egotism. And by that he meant we need to earn the goodwill of the people around us, which is a neat idea, because if you have all the people around you supporting you, you're not going to have enemies and you're going to have a lot less stress. And he also said to work toward our goals, and I think this is very important, to think about what are my goals in doing this work, what do I want to achieve, what matters to me. And if you think about that, and each time you're going out to help, and each time you're doing something that's part of this work, you're thinking, how am I moving toward my goals? Not, as Selye says, not your mother's goals or other people's goals for you, but the goals that really matter to you. It really relates back ultimately to your purpose in doing the work. If you're achieving that, it feels very good, and that can really alleviate a lot of stress. Selye mentioning that we should practice altruistic egotism and build our support network is what I was wanting to say is my final and maybe the most important suggestion in terms of managing stress, which is to build a good support system. And when we're doing this work, as I've said already, sometimes the support isn't there, sometimes we don't take advantage of it, we don't avail ourselves because it's scary to talk about our experiences. But my motto is, if the world feels cold, light a small fire and it'll spread. One of the best ways you can build support for yourself is to offer support to others. So if you're hurting inside, look around and try to get support, and if you're feeling good, offer support to people, because it's very important that you do that, and then when you're needing help, others will be there for you. We've reached the end of our program, but before we stop, I want to share with you my appreciation for the work that you do as a caring helper. You know, though, the appreciation that I feel is just a fraction of that experience by the people you care for. One volunteer shared this moment with me. A few weeks ago, a woman met me at the door saying, "You are the angel in my life." She said, "At night, when the hours stretch into eternity, I remember your smile, your positive attitude, your gentle hands, and that carries me onto a sunny morning, even when it's raining." Another volunteer shared, "Upon meeting an elderly woman, small and frail, I was preparing to explain how I could assist her, but before I could begin my presentation, she lifted her hand slightly and then she spoke clearly, 'So, you are to be my warrior.' You are a caring warrior, and as you continue on your helping journey, I hope you remember that you need to stop and take rests for yourself. You need to be replenished and nourished, and I hope that some of the skills and some of the support that you've received through this program are helpful to you on that journey. For all the people that you help in difficult times, thank you.
I think the most helpful thing is just the sense that somebody cares. I mean, I know that for myself, even now, sometimes I question when somebody dies, am I saying the appropriate thing? Am I helpful to them? And I wonder if that insecurity ever subsides. But I think that I know in my heart of hearts that the thing that connects most is just the fact that you care.
The need to talk is this. I'm kind of a quiet, reserved kind of guy normally, but I needed people around me, and luckily I saw a core group of really good people who talked. Maybe people are different, their personalities are different, but they all talked and listened in different ways too. But none, you missed that deep, intimate conversation that you had with your spouse, and I think that was the biggest thing. There's no one you can talk to like you can a spouse of 24 years.
As I say, the first month or so, I was very angry and very bitter. I was very bitter with the priests and the Catholic Church and what it was. But then I understood that this is part of life, as Joe says, and everyone says this is part of living and part of dying. Only I just didn't want my little girl to die.
I'm glad now that I didn't run away from it. Although I really don't think there's any getting away from it. I mean, you can only be busy so many hours a day, and you still have to sleep, and you still get to dream, and
you're really always with yourself.
Right. So it's always there, and once I realize I just can't rush it, and I just have to be with it. That's the way it is. And you're alive, you're okay. I guess the feeling of you're okay. You're okay. Everything's still going to be all right.
Yeah, I think that's maybe what your dad would probably say to you too. Like to say to you.
Yeah.
It sounded for a second like him.
As a matter of fact, that's what he would always say whenever I had a problem. It's all right. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
He also used to say, though, I'm here. I'm here for you.
Yeah.
So that's the missing piece.
That's the missing piece.